Hello and welcome to the launch of Helen Rayson-Hill's Eleanor, the Firebrand Queen, hosted by Interactive Publications Pty Ltd, headquarters in Brisbane, Australia. Helen has long been interested in medieval history, especially in the life of Eleanor of Aquitaine. After many years of research, inspired originally by the play Lion in Winter by James Goldman, Helen was motivated to write about Eleanor's amazing life. Consequently, Eleanor, the Firebrand Queen, became the first in a planned series of historical novels about this medieval feminist. But today, I do have the book introduced and launched by Toni Jordan, who unfortunately couldn't be with us today in person or virtually in person, but has instead sent us a video introduction, which I'll play for you shortly. Toni Jordan is a Miles Franklin long-listee, twice winner of the Indie Award for Best Debut and Best Fiction, 3 times ABI shortlist, and long-listed for the International Dublin Literary Award. Toni has been published widely in newspapers and magazines and holds a Bachelor of Science in Physiology and a PhD in Creative Arts. Her next novel will be Dinner at the Schnabels, to be published in April next year. With no further ado, I'll turn it over to Toni.
Hello, everyone. I'm sorry I'm not with you all today, but I'm delighted to be virtually present, and I'm delighted to say a few words about Helen and Eleanor. Back in 2016, I was fortunate enough to be writer in residence for the Lyceum Club here in Melbourne. I confess that before I received the invitation, I knew nothing about the Lyceum Club. That would soon change. I loved my year there so much that when it was over, I applied to become a member of the club myself. There were many things I loved about the Lyceum Club. I loved the camaraderie of the members from all walks of life, and I loved the club's commitment to learning and to sharing knowledge. I especially loved meeting some remarkable women. Today, I'd like to speak to you about 2 remarkable women. One of them, Helen Rayson-Hill, I met during a fiction writing workshop I held during my year as the Lyceum Club's writer in residence. I remember many of our early conversations about her work, but it took until December of 2016 before I convinced her to let me read some of it. Back then, Helen's working title was Diaries of a Radical Queen. Straight away, I thought it was, and I'm quoting from my notes here, a fantastic idea. I thought it was the kind of thing that everyone wants to read, with the potential to be sensational. At the beginning of our discussions, Helen and I talked mostly about the voice of Eleanor as it would appear in her journal. That leads me to the second remarkable woman I want to talk about, who is, of course, Eleanor herself. In an email Helen sent me in late 2016, she talked about the Eleanor that she wanted to convey, and how she was a different woman from the staid and dry accounts of history. Helen said that to her, Eleanor was feisty, definitely imperious, highly intelligent and sensual. She was beautiful and wealthy beyond imagining, and that she came to loathe Louis, her husband. In describing Eleanor, Helen told me this: she is raging. This raging has become a vital character trait in Helen's compelling portrait of Eleanor. She is quick to anger, and she doesn't hide the way she feels. In Helen's hands, Eleanor comes to life. She is dynamic and vibrant. We can feel her energy and determination. Writing a character so sharply is no easy task. Historical fiction has a number of distinct challenges, among them dialogue. In setting her work in the 12th century, Helen needed to decide how best to represent the word choices and speech patterns of people who are long gone. She needed to give them a feeling of accuracy, yet still maintain a poetry and a rhythm, and most importantly, a sense of distinctiveness that brings each individual character alive. That everything is so vivid is because of two things. Firstly, the large amount of hard work that Helen has done in researching the historical specifics of the story, but also the way she's introduced that research with such a light and sure hand, so that we feel immersed in the time without ever being hit over the head with it. As a piece of historical fiction, it's full of not just the physical details that Helen uses to capture the specifics of the time and place, but also the way she shows us the mores, conventions, and social constraints of the early decades of the 12th century. From that first day that Helen told me her idea for telling Eleanor's story, I was struck by the clarity and particularity of her vision. It was though on some level, Helen knew what Eleanor was really like. I also felt that Helen was more than a little annoyed that Eleanor's true character hadn't been captured by the existing literature. It was almost as though Helen wanted to write this book on Eleanor's behalf. Helen was always supremely confident about Eleanor's story. She knew exactly what was important about it, and she was resolute in finding the best possible way to tell it. Helen's book, Eleanor the Firebrand Queen, is quite unputdownable, but it is more than that. I have no doubt that you'll find it, as I did, a gateway drug for early English and French history. You'll start probably by Googling Eleanor of Aquitaine herself and reading what you can about her and her husbands and her offspring. Soon you'll find yourself yearning to know more and seeking out other books on Eleanor and her line. You'll probably also be inspired to punch Louis VII in the face because he is a complete jerk. This is how involving this book is. I am not a violent woman, but I would happily smack Louis around a bit. Eleanor the Firebrand Queen is a hugely enjoyable read, and luckily for all of you, there's still another week or so of winter, so you can buy a copy, snuggle under the covers, and listen to the rain on the windows, and be glad you're not the one married to Louis. In fact, I'm sure you know someone who is greatly in need of a rainy day read, so perhaps buy 2 copies and your friend will love you forever. It is my great honor to have played a very small part in Helen's journey to bring Eleanor's story to life, and also my honor to declare Eleanor the Firebrand Queen officially launched.
We're going to go straight into Helen's reading from the book, so please take it away, Helen.
Thank you, David. Just a little backstory before I start reading. On her return from Jerusalem, Eleanor's ships were caught in a violent storm in the Mediterranean, and they were blown onto the north coast of Africa. Eleanor was actually badly injured in that storm by being thrown around in the ship. Louis, her husband, travelled on a different ship, which was normal for the times. And also I refer to Eleanor's maids as the Beatles because they were dressed in black like nuns. Also, she didn't like them very much. Anyway, here we go. The repair of my senses is frustrating. My bumps and bruises have long healed. This morning I sat in my bedchamber, a tiny nook with sandstone walls, and stared at my stowed treasure. I found the mystery chest. With all my might, I tried to remember what was inside. I lifted the lid. The flash of gold couched in royal purple told me it was more than special. Gently, I removed an exquisite, bejeweled girdle. It was heavy. My fingers traced over its finely woven gold thread, pearls and rubies. The chest exuded a sweet perfume that filled my nostrils. Memory hovered like a will-o'-the-wisp I could not grasp. Panic made my heart race. What was wrong with me? I breathed deeply to control the anxiety as the wave of familiar scent awoke something in my brain. Like a flash of lightning illuminating darkness, it all came back, just like that. The knot of Hercules, Abraham, Judith, Hamid Abdullah emerged from my dulled mind. God be praised, my wits had returned. Before I placed it back, I buried my nose in the fold of its silken nest. I inhaled the perfume of my love, spicy sandalwood. Oh, Abraham. I have hated the girdle, resented it, and vowed I would never wear it. Besides the joy of my restored memory lay the sadness of my lost love. I curled the girdle back into the chest and tucked in its pearled fringes. Shall I ever open it again? Who knows? Days became weeks. The measured tempo of village life is enjoyable. The women gossip around the pump, grind grains for the delicious bread they make, spin wool for their goats, and dye it in brilliant colours to weave into cloth. They knot rugs and make cushions like the ones in the room where Abraham and I lay together. For sentimental reasons, I have asked if I can buy one or more. Cheeky boys herd goats, looking for pasture in the surrounding barren land. Near the fort, there are ancient olive trees with twisted, gnarled trunks, so reminiscent of Lombriere. Within its compound, there are grape arbors. Hens run everywhere. The young girls collect the eggs. The whole village has a timeless ambience, a relaxed charm, so opposite to my life. Our ships are almost ready to sail, repairs completed. Angelique's arm is mended. It was bliss not having her disproving sneer hovering over me. Maybe I should break the other one. I cannot thank Maris enough for all she has done during the weeks I was grappling in the misty fog of amnesia. I hope the relief I feel since the return of my memory will help me look at my life in a more balanced manner. I cannot but admire Amaris. She has overcome such adversity since she lost her family. The pirates who captured her sold her to a slave merchant who decided to take her for his wife. His family treated her most ill, but one day she managed to escape only to find she was with child. She tried to reach her mother's home in Ephesus, but was forced to stay in Bodrum. There her child was born, but died shortly afterwards. Again, she was captured by other slavers and ended up in Antioch, where I found her being beaten for attempting to escape. Her fortitude gives me courage to fight for my future. My determination to annul my marriage has not disappeared, but I am confident I can now confront Louis without trying to strangle him. When we sailed from the Greek islands, he looked like a kicked dog, desperate for his master's approval, but terrified of another beating. Once I was so angry, I would have not cared one jot about his feelings. Now I know not. What was it he said in Jerusalem? Are you naturally cruel? I do not know if he's still alive. It has been 2 months since we left the islands. He probably thinks I have perished. There is no way to inform him of our plight. I still have his letter. The village fishermen tell us the winds should be fair for our departure in the morning, followed by a swift journey to the coast of Sicily. We aim to dock at Syracuse in the south before sailing on to Salerno and Ostia. At Salerno, I will arrange for the couriers to ride with all haste to Rome to give Louis the news, if he's still there, that we are safe in proceeding to Ostia. Should I find he's returned to France, I will go ahead to beg the Pope's indulgence and to put forward my petition. Before leaving our little haven, we have all given thanks to God and our kind hosts. It has given me a pleasure to give alms to Georgius, the head of the village. Underground water is plentiful and a new well can now be completed. There is coin for strengthening the seawall and to buy a camel to take produce to distant inland markets. The hard-working women have given me a vivid shawl. The brilliant red comes from the madder root, they tell me. Indigo, I know well, it is one of my favourite hues. All my maids have received pieces of embroidered fabric, such kindness from those who have so little. I have bought 2 of the camellia cushions. I have had pleasure talking to Georgius. He is a good man. He is well respected by his people for his wisdom and fairness. I have learned from him by observing the way he handles disputes between villages. He is patient and listens carefully before giving advice or meting out justice. And although not educated in a scholarly way, one perceives he is not without intelligence. I know several people in our court who could learn from this honest man. I've praised God for our survival and for the skilled seamanship of our gallant captains who steered our limping barks to safety. Introspection tells me I need to look at myself. I'm so privileged. So much I take for granted. Nilla is right. I have been spoiled. I know when to use my title for my advantage, to make people bend to my will. Even kind Georgius's demeanour changed when he was told by our captain who I am. I had to beg him to judge me as a person, not by a title. As we farewelled these good people, I wondered if I would ever be able to rein in my impetuosity, my lack of discipline, my temper. Dear God, I have so much to learn. It was indeed a fast trip to Syracuse. The bustling activity on the wharf when we docked was almost overwhelming. People rushing hither and yon, donkeys were braying, merchants calling in many tongues, surrounded by all manner of enterprise. Our captain tells me we will stay for a few days in port to replace some of the rigging and sails he could not purchase in Rusica. Although the village fishermen were able to provide timbers and pitch to make our bark seaworthy, we could not leave them without gear for their own maintenance. Our captains and sailors had to improvise repairs, using bits and pieces from each other's vessels. The ships have become a patched combination of each other. With the Praetorian Guard, Amaris, Angelique, and the Beatles, we did little shopping of our own in the nearby market in Syracuse. To me, this was such a treat, for I rarely get to take part in such frivolous activity. I found a scribe from whom I purchased ink, parchment, and quills. Amaris's nose discovered some heavenly perfumed oils and soap. Oh, now that was a luxury. I bought the Beatles some lovely embroidered handkerchiefs. By the noonday bells, we repaired to the ship, giggling like milkmaids. Salerno came and went. However, it was there I learned Pope Eugenius was residing at Tusculum, not Rome, due to an ongoing dispute with Arnold of Brescia. It appears it is not only our nobles who try to usurp each other's powers, holy clerics can do the same. I care not where Eugenius resides, as long as I can petition him regarding the annulment of my marriage. I recall Cicero once resided in Tusculum. I may need to call on his ghostly legal argument when I draft my plea. Whether Louis is there, I know not. Docking in Ostia was a relief. I have to admit, my love of sailing has been diminished a little after the storm that tossed us onto the Barbary coast. I found the old port fascinating. Some of the ancient towns still functions, but much is still crumbling into ruins. I would have loved to explore, but there was no time for such occupation, as I was eager to press on to Tusculum. Horses were waiting. As I have not been on horseback since I left Jerusalem for Acre, I will probably be stiff and sore on arrival. A small price to pay, seeing I'm alive and well after our travail at sea. Soon after I dismounted at Tusculum, I was ushered into the Pope's audience chamber. There was Louis. My feelings were mixed. Relief he was still in Italy, but sickened by his presence. Louis threw himself on his knees, wrapped his arms around my waist and sobbed into my gown. God, he wailed, had answered his prayers and returned me to his bosom. One would think I'd risen from the dead. I was mightily embarrassed. Worse, Pope Eugenius stood there with a benign expression on his puffy face, nodding as if we were reunited lovers. Louis, I cannot draw breath. Please let me go. In the end, Eugenius managed to persuade him I needed to sit and have some refreshments. As it happened, Louis had been caught in the same storm as we struck, but his vessel, being larger, was able to limp into Brindisi, where it was delayed by repairs. They took to horses to ride to the Pope's palace. He was not so far ahead of me after all. Louis babbled he'd almost lost hope of ever seeing me again. Pope Eugenius agreed. My husband, he said, had spent his time prostrate in fervent prayer before the altar in his quarters. Also, the whole church had sung a special mass on the king's behalf that my life be spared from a watery grave. I was at a loss for words. My plans for annulment were becoming awkward. Eugenius ordered Louis to take me to my chamber. With a lurid twinkle in his eye, he insisted I be welcomed in an appropriate manner. My chamber is vast. Tapestries, Byzantium carpets, an altar, and all manner of exquisite drapery are overwhelming after the cramped cabin on the bark and the simple stone chamber in the old fort of Rusica. I had a dilemma: how to get rid of an ardent Louis. Wherever I moved, he hovered behind me. He raved he had lived in despair, not knowing if I was alive or dead. His life over the last months had been hell on earth. He thought he was being punished for every sin he'd ever committed and the failed crusade. My taciturn husband had become more garrulous than a mummer. I begged him to hush, which he perceived as me wanting something more physical. In 2 strides, he crossed me to him. My veil hampered his awkward attempt to kiss me. I shoved him away and stumbled into a chair, head in hands. "Louis, I am not well." He panicked. He said he would fetch the Pope's physician, a most learned man. Tears of frustration filled my eye. Not once had he asked what had happened to our fleet, to me, or anyone else, not even the Beatles. I told him I needed to bathe and to go to bed, to sleep. I did not need a physician. The tortured dog left me to my misery. God's teeth, what a mess. I have written my petition to Pope Eugenius. Surely rumours about the state of our marriage have reached his ears, or has Louis's pathetic display on my arrival made him think there is something still between us? I await the Pope's reply. In the meantime, I spoke with Louis. He kept away from me, believing my tale, but Angelique would soon put paid to my so-called illness unless I confronted Louis. My good intentions to become more conciliatory flew off like migrating swallows. My meeting with Louis was a screaming fit on my part, with him retreating into his kennel. I reminded him, though he had spent a lot of time praying for me, he'd shown no interest whatsoever in what transpired at sea or where we found shelter. I roared at him I found more kindness and care among a simple Berber tribe than from him. Prayers were all very well, but thoughtfulness was a greater remedy. Horrified, he accused me of blasphemy. He had prayed for me because he loved me. I yelled back, asking why he'd shown no interest in what had befallen me. Silence. I thundered I was lucky to be alive and stormed out. As I write this, I am still fuming. I was summoned to present myself to Eugenius. Louis stood beside the Pope. Eugenius waffled on about the sanctity of marriage. He said King Louis's recent prayers and prostrations proved how much my husband loved me, verified what Eugenius had witnessed himself. I know I should not have rolled my eyes. The Pope asked me to translate my gesture. My reply was too blunt. It did me no good. The dressing down I received was humiliating. Eugenius reminded me as a woman, it was my duty to obey my husband. As Queen of France, it was my duty to produce the heir to the throne to continue a noble dynasty. I was told to curb my tongue. I was far too outspoken, which was not flattering in one of my sex and status. Now, where have I heard that before? He dismissed my petition, ordered me into Louis's bed to fulfill my husband's needs and to do my duty. You are far too learned, Eleanor of Aquitaine, Queen of France. I suggest you keep away from books and leave them to your superiors. If a woman has ever torn into a pope before now, I know not. I yanked my arm from Louis's grip. I told you, Junius, I would burn in hell before learning was denied to me, nor could I, in God's name, unlearn the knowledge I already had gained, any more than he could. Furthermore, books were as much my God-given right as any man's. He was speechless. Louis nearly had a fit, hauling me out of the Pope's throne room before I could add more fuel to the flames. My reputation is in tatters. The clergy avoid me in case I cross their path like a black cat. I do not think I will ever be allowed in to set foot in Rome or Tusculum again. All haste is being made for our return to France. I'm suffering Louis' grunting and groaning. The only person who has hoisted me onto a pedestal is Amaris, who has not stopped grinning since my outburst. Needless to say, the Pope did not see us off. Louis says I should thank God none of us have been excommunicated, and an interdict put on all of France, denying the population the sacraments. I told him to stop nagging if he wants access to my bed. It is going to be a long trip.
Thank you very much, Helen, for your spirited reading.